Hello and welcome back to my podcast. Thank you for being here. Today I'm going to talk about supplements. Do you need them? And things that you should be looking out for when you're buying them if you do decide that you need them. Supplements are a huge subject. So actually I've decided to do a few different videos on this. So today I'm going to be talking generally about supplements and what to look out for, what to avoid, what to be wary of, and I'll touch on multivitamins. And then in the future, I shall talk about supplements for IBS. I shall talk about supplements for anxiety. I shall be talking about ashwagandha. I shall be talking about medicinal mushrooms. Let me know if there's anything else you would like me to discuss in terms of supplements. So let's get started. So I wonder if you yourself take supplements and if you are confused about taking supplements and what you should take and what you shouldn't take. And it's perfectly understandable if you are. There are some good sources of information. I know now that it's quite popular to ask ChatGPT or other AI places to find yourself some information, and that can be helpful, but they might miss some things. So there's things to be mindful of, which I will talk to you about in a moment. So first things first is, what is it that you want the supplement for? Because at all times, it's always good to think, can I support this with food and lifestyle? Because often a pill, a capsule, or whatever it is that you're wanting to take isn't going to solve the problem. It might be a good complement, and I do use supplements with my clients in clinic, but it isn't necessarily a magic bullet. So it is worth thinking about that. What problem are you trying to solve? And when it comes to supplements, they do vary. And I am going to explore the difference between, for example, a high street, maybe a supermarket multivitamin versus something that a professional might recommend to you, and the difference and what you can account for when you're buying your own supplements. One reason why you might be looking for a supplement is that you might have had some blood tests to show that something is a little bit low. Now, if you haven't had blood tests, it is always advisable, particularly if you're experiencing things like fatigue, tiredness, hair loss. I do advise anyway, if you've got any health concerns, to go and see your doctor and do get tested to make sure that there isn't a proper issue. And if there is an issue like low B12, which is quite common, or low iron, then of course it can be supported with a supplement, it can be supported with diet, but you do need to be careful that you're taking the right form of the nutrient, you're not going over the top with it, or indeed if it's something that's absorbable in the first place. Now, there are medical conditions as well that are contraindicated with some supplements. So, if you have a diagnosed health condition, it is important really to seek advice whether or not you should be taking certain supplements. And this is especially true if you are on medication, because a lot of medications interact. And by that, I'm also talking about contraception as well, because the contraceptive, whether that's a coil with some hormones, or whether it's HRT, or just a regular oral contraception, these can have interactions with supplements as well. So if you're trying to balance your hormones, but you're also taking hormones, some of those ingredients in the supplement might actually be fighting with your actual contraception or your hormone replacement therapy, or whatever it is. So it's really important to be looking out for these interactions. And when you work with a practitioner like myself, we have access to databases where we look at the interactions for all the medications and dive deep into what that is to ensure that what you're taking is appropriate and safe. So if you are on medication, you really do need to, be extra cautious. And yes, you can ask your doctor, but the doctor doesn't always know about these interactions. So just come at it from all angles and be super conscientious about it. So health conditions and in medications, to be looking out for those. But I do, in many cases, I do recommend people to get blood tests done before they start supplementing with things, particularly something like iron, because iron it's so important for so many things, and it's definitely indicated for fatigue, tiredness, thyroid issues, hair loss. However, sometimes it's not enough to just take an iron supplement, and iron actually can be toxic. It's one of the nutrients in the body that can actually get stored in the wrong place and have a toxic effect. So we have to be very, very careful with that. So testing before and after is useful. This also applies to things like B12 and vitamin D, because everybody's needs are different. And although there are recommended amounts, those recommended amounts actually are just to keep us above deficiency. And actually, that was on my list of things I was going to say. The nutrient reference value, the NRV, this is something you will see on your packet of vitamins. So particularly for vitamins and minerals, you will see it will say something like 100% of your NRV. And basically that's just saying that it meets 100% of the needs of um, that recommended amount. However, that recommended amount is only based on keeping a healthy population out of nutrient deficiency. In other words, it isn't really enough to keep you in optimal health. On the other end of that, we also have safe upper limits. So we need to make sure that we don't exceed the limit of safety for whatever nutrient that is. And pretty much most nutrients have got a safe upper limit, although there are a few that don't. But that doesn't mean to say that we can take them in limitless amounts, because there will be a point where it becomes harmful. So that's something else to consider. And a reason why, when you are buying your Tesco multivitamin, it will say 100% for the NRV, but actually it will only be a very tiny amount, and it might not be a therapeutic enough amount for you to make the difference to what you're trying to support. What else did I want to say? Okay, so when it comes to brands versus professional brands versus supermarket brands, that's a good place to start. So often you do hear sometimes people saying, "Oh, are multivitamins expensive? Well, yes and no. So if you are buying a supermarket or low budget multivitamin, then most of the time I would say that is probably a waste of time. Not expensive because they're actually not that expensive. But it just might not be giving you the results that you are looking for. And that's because of many things. One thing which I mentioned a moment ago is that the levels of nutrients are very, very low. So it might not have a therapeutic effect in the first place. And secondly, because they are made on a budget, which is totally understandable, they have to use the cheapest ingredients, and the cheapest ingredients are not always easily absorbed by the body. So examples of that are, such as vitamin B12, for example. So a more artificial version of that is going to be much harder to absorb than a little bit more of an active version. So the artificial version, I've written them down to remind myself, is a cyanocobalamin. And the one that I recommend, the more active form of the nutrient, is methylcobalamin, which is what you'll see in more professional range products. And it just means that it's a little bit more active, more available for you to absorb. And likewise, also, you will tend to see on the cheaper range of supplements, and actually sometimes even in the higher range ones, you'll see folic acid. And you'll probably think, folic acid, that's what I need. But actually, it's called folate. It's called vitamin B9. And the actual version we need is called folate. And actually, folate comes a lot of the time from leafy green vegetables. And so getting it from a food is obviously preferred, but sometimes we do need that. And of course, it's something recommended for women pre-pregnancy and during those early months of pregnancy. And often it is folic acid that we're told to take. However, the artificial and synthetic form of folic acid can be harder to absorb. And for some people with genetic issues, they can't use it very well at all. And in fact, it can almost stop the body from producing its own. So taking a more absorbable form is usually better for most people, though everybody is different. And this will be the methylfolate version. And sometimes on the packet, it might say 5 MTHF. So looking out for the more absorbable version of your folic acid, folate, your B12. There's so many. I haven't got time to go into every single one, but another one is you don't tend to see calcium in a multivitamin. They don't seem to feature. But if you are wanting to take calcium, and this is something that we don't really recommend everybody does, but if for some reason you have been recommended, quite often the prescribed version is calcium carbonate, otherwise known as chalk, and it's really poorly absorbed. So it's again, it's something to think about is calcium citrate, and there's some other versions of calcium as well. They're a little bit more gentle on the body to absorb. And iron, I alluded to earlier about how important it is to get your iron checked. And actually, on that note, just a sort of little bit of a go off on a tangent, but when you do get your bloods tested, just make sure you get the data and you don't just get told that everything's fine. Because actually, NHS reference ranges for nutrients like iron and B12 and folate and ferritin, which is an iron storage protein, which is commonly used as an indicator of iron status. These reference ranges are very broad. And what that means is that you can easily get missed. You can have a deficiency, you can be suboptimal and be classed as okay because of the reference ranges being so broad. So do get your data and look into it, or share it with a practitioner like myself, because then we can look at what's going on. Because quite often I see so many clients who say that their iron and their B12 is fine, and it isn't. And it really does explain a lot of what's going on. So back to iron, and the iron that might be prescribed to you might be ferrous sulfate, which is poorly absorbed by the body and also can cause digestive issues. So iron bisglycinate is a more preferred version, and of course you can also up the iron content of food. I do not recommend spinach and leafy greens for iron because it's a completely different form, and it also contains other nutrients that sort of block iron absorption as well. I'm not saying leafy greens are bad, they're great for other things, but your iron really needs to come from red meat and animal sources. Or if you're vegetarian, you can have black beans and lentils, optimize it with vitamin C, but you might need a supplement. You can also, there's animal organ supplements as well. Well, we haven't got time to talk about those today. Another one that we're encouraged to take, particularly those people living in the UK, in the Northern Hemisphere, is vitamin D. And it's important to make sure you get the right form of vitamin D. So it's vitamin D3 we need, not vitamin D2. But also we need to make sure that we've got the other nutrients needed for vitamin D3 to be made, absorbed, optimized in the body. And that includes magnesium, and it also includes vitamin K2. Vitamin K2 really help because vitamin D does a lot of different jobs, and one of the jobs it does is it helps to normalize your calcium. It has a role for calcium absorption, and so vitamin K2 plays a part in that role. So it's really ensuring that the calcium you take in goes into the bones and the teeth where it's supposed to go, as opposed to into soft tissue. So that's what vitamin K2 is for. So please do make sure that if you take vitamin D, it's got vitamin K2 as well, unless of course you have been advised by your doctor because you are on some kind of blood thinning medication, but actually that's vitamin K1 anyway. So it should be okay, but you must talk to your doctor if you're on any medications. But you really do need to think of things as working in synergy, and actually a lot of nutrients do work together as a team. That's why I'm not very keen on seeing people taking lots and lots and lots of different individual nutrients, because a lot of the time they do need to work together. What else? So we've talked about dosage. Maybe it's not enough. We've talked about forms and how some are not as absorbable. Something else you're going to see in cheaper brands, and also sometimes you do see them in the expensive ones as well, including some products that I do recommend, is something called excipients. And they're basically added ingredients that we don't really want, but they might be there for shelf life. They might also have other reasons they're there. So what I'm suggesting is when you do buy a product is look at the extra ingredients. If the first ingredients is maltodextrin, which is a type of sugar, then that maybe have a think about whether or not that's something that you want to have. So bulking agents, all sorts of different things that you're not really looking for. So see if you can get as pure a formula as you can. Usually, if you get it in a capsule, it's going to be a bit of a purer formula. It'll have a vegetable cellulose capsule, and it tends to be a formula that's got fewer additives in. If it's a tablet, then there will probably be things in there to bind it together. So there's more added ingredients. There is a professional range product that I really like, and it is a tablet. It does have some extra ingredients, but on the whole, I like the big the combination and the dose, it's pretty good. So I kind of weigh that up. But in your cheaper supplements, you are going to get more of these added extras that you aren't really wanting. So just something else to think about. And actually, that brings me on to the formulas as well. So you can get the tablets, you can get the capsules, you can get powders, you can get gummies, and you can get patches, and probably something else that I haven't thought about. So what's the best formula for you? Now, the easiest thing, I like capsules a lot, and they are very useful. However, capsules and tablets are harder to digest. So if you are really compromised in your immunity, then you might find that if you've been taking a supplement that way and you're not getting the results that you need, and it is a good dose, it might be that you are struggling to break down and absorb it. So it might be worth thinking about something a little bit more absorbable. You can get liquid formulas that you can put into water, into juice, and so on. You can get powders. Now, both the liquid and powders that you have to mix into another liquid, the good thing is that they can be more absorbable. The downside is they might have to have sweeteners or something extra added to them just to make them more palatable, to make them taste nice. So, sometimes we just have to have that, particularly, for example, if you do have poor absorption, or if you can't swallow a capsule or a tablet, or if it's for a child or a person that, really struggles with that. So sometimes you have to weigh these things up, but it's something to think about. And likewise with gummies, sometimes the good thing about gummies is you'll get quite high compliance, which basically means we're keen to eat them because they taste like sweets. So it's easy, isn't it, to just quickly chew a gummy. The downside is that sometimes we can't get a therapeutic dose of something in a gummy. If it's a multi-nutrient, it probably hasn't got everything in it. It's probably not that comprehensive. But it depends on the individual company. There are some very good companies that do gummies, and the ingredients are pretty nice, and there's a good dose in there. So it's just looking at the ingredient label as well. You can get a kind of gels as well. So again, they're going to have maybe sweeteners or sugar in them, but they can be better absorbed. And patches. And patches are fairly new to me, but the good thing about this is that they can have a really effective absorption, especially if you've got compromised digestive health. And also, of course, for those people that struggle with tastes, textures, all those sorts of problems that you might have. So, for example, maybe a child who is really quite particular about what they're putting in their mouth. So that might be appropriate, and it might be appropriate for you as well. So, anything else I wanted to say? So, of course, I haven't told you, what to take, but I'm hopefully this will give you some information for when you're choosing supplements. So, just to recap, consider first, if you're on medication, you really do need to check for interactions. Try not to take lots and lots of different supplements because there are upper limits and we don't want you to overdose, or there are things that interact with each other. Make sure you're buying a product that actually does what it says, and they're not always tested, unfortunately. So, try to buy a reputable brand with a decent amount in. Think about the absorption and whether it's something you're going to remember to take. I've talked about health conditions. Also, just think to yourself, is this something that I really need? Or am I just trying to take a pill and I'm a bit in denial of something else? So, for example, particularly the stress ones, do I really just need to work on my stress management, my sleep, and things like that? We can talk about that another time. But, can you support with diet and lifestyle? Anyway, if you found this helpful, please like and share. Also, please feel free to comment, feel free to ask me questions. And if you want me to talk about other types of supplements, then do feel free to ask. Thanks so much for being here and see you again next time.